our next level and what it means for us coming down the pipe.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Do I sound like I mumble to you guys?
That's how you normally talk. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, really?
You got that Kermit the Frog going on.
I feel I've got a call today with a speech pathologist to try and get my voice back, right? Like to try and get my speech back. And in my head, I'm thinking, I don't need a speech pathologist. And then after I just said what I just said, I'm like, did I mumble half of that as the video was playing? I'm going, maybe I do. All I heard was.
It was so bad, Dan, that Jeff's internet said, "Screw it, I'm done." You know?
Yeah, I said that's
yeah. Jeff's internet says, "Screw it, I'm done." When somebody farts the wrong way around his house, like that's it goes down, you know. So,
no, not now.
Yeah. Hold it till you get around the block.
That's a pretty
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome.
We're good. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Dean,
Pumped for
you're at
today.
the Women in Trucking Conference.
Yeah. Huge event. I'd highly encourage everyone to go. I mean, there's a lot of vendors here. So again, surprised to see all the big truck OEMs there. The Waymo autonomous truck is here with like 55,000 cameras. It's unbelievable to see how many cameras this thing has got on. But
are they doing
it's got
like
everything.
Test drives and stuff?
No, but it's just got everything but the driver, which is the bit that really puts a burr in my saddle about. So it's got everything you'd imagine on a truck. The Western Star booth, fantastic. They have the American Truck Simulator Texas. So it's a simulator that a lot of young people, I guess anybody plays these days at home, but it's on hydraulics. So it's like one of those sims you fly when you fly I've flown a 747 sim. In Sydney Airport, you're on hydraulics, and the whole thing's full G-forces. So it was funny that one of the ladies was there driving the sim, and she gets into a corner a bit hot, and I'm flashed back to my days of lifting triaxles off the ground with spring suspension to see how long we can hold it 6 inches off the ground in corners, and she starts to fall out of the
in a very
seat.
safe way, right, Dean? In a very safe way.
Oh no, there's nothing safe about safety.
I like how Dan tried to save that one, but
this was overnight air freight. We had to keep ourselves motivated. Spring suspension. So serious thought though. Spring suspensions, you can hold a trailer at a pretty steep angle with spring suspensions really easily. Airbags are a different thing because they'll go and go and go, and then they'll hold. You just don't know what that hold point is, and that's why sometimes they go over. But anyway, so the story was that simulated very real. So I've driven a couple of sims. This was incredibly real. I don't know if you guys have ever had the opportunity to drive these modern day sims, but this was 180-degree visual on 3 big screens on hydraulics. Nice. So full immersion, other than the noise of the ambient noise of the exhibition hall, incredibly real. The trucks on the road, like corners. I've never been a big fan because I could never get the real feel of the road, but this is a great way to get people thinking about speed and braking and corners. So that was a highlight. So a lot of the big truck OEMs are there, but the highlight.
So did the lady crash, or what was the deal when she came too hot in the corner?
No. So it came back down. I posted a video on social media. You can see how it goes up and up and up, and then she holds. She panics a bit, and then comes back down, as we all would do when you get to that panic point, and then it came back down. But just a lot of interactive booths. Good friends from Australia are here. Yogi Kendall, famous from the Outback Truckers. He's here with Simon Sutherland from Next Journey. They've designed a really cool bag for truckers. What's different about that one is it's got a compartment down the bottom to put all your wet gear. So when you go into a shower as a trucker, a lot of times you have to mix your wet clothes and towels and everything with all of your other gear. He's got a bunch of compartments where you can separate wet from dry and electronics and things like that. So just lots of cool technology, lots of very good speakers. And I was just super impressed with Nicole Glenn yesterday, actually. She did a really good keynote speech on her success of her business and what keeps her motivated. Ends at 2 o'clock today. I'm the closing keynote speaker. And that'll be a wrap for this year. Put it on your list for next year, though. That one, it's a very good event for everybody to attend.
And where is it held?
Yeah.
It's at the I'm going to say Anatoly Hotel in Dallas, but it might be Anatole. I could have that wrong. Yep, in Dallas.
Nice.
It's right next to the Parkland Hospital. It turns out I only had a short Uber ride last night.
we won't go there this morning, Dean. We won't go there this morning.
Yeah. So
you're better now, though?
Yeah.
Everything's good? You
Yeah,
feel good? You feel better? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll still get the load in on time, although we struggle with it.
No matter what, the load always gets there on time. It's all good.
Yeah.
6 inches
Really?
up or not,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's it.
I hear you. I hear you.
So
talk about
some
demand
data.
indicators, Dean. What's going on with demand indicators these days?
So that, clearly we've got softening demand. It doesn't matter where you look, you've got indicators of softening demand. Although I will caveat that with saying that Jason Miller's post yesterday was really insightful. I think he's got the best data set. The Michigan State University Ton Mile Index represents 41 freight generating commodities. I like it. It's not sort of, Cass has got a bit of truckload and LTL. ATA's got a lot of truckload and I think a bit of intermodal. I'm not sure. But it's mostly heavy freight, right? In the ATA truckload tonnage index. The MSU one is really interesting because it's kind of ton miles and it represents truckload and volumes are up 4.2% year over year. He kind of said the market's going sideways, which I thought was interesting. But the fact that his index is, higher than it's been in previous years, up nearly, just over 4%. I think it's a really good sign for freight demand. Now, of course, we've said we've got headwinds coming, early next year, but that to me was a positive indicator because I think most of our, as Jason also says, 58% of our ton miles come from the manufacturing sector. I think we've got some manufacturing numbers out today. I'm not sure on exactly what they look like. So, but when you break it down to a segment level, and he does a really good job at this in that LinkedIn post, and I'd encourage everyone to read it. He talks about things like flatbed demand and how housing is literally cratering because of this, higher interest rates at 6%. And so his point was, and I think it's a really valid one for everybody to think about, even though we say that demand might be flat to up 4 to 5%, let's say it ends the year flat, it'll be very different at a commodity level. So he said anybody with exposure to flatbed and housing construction, very different story. Anybody exposed to produce season out of Yuma, Arizona, very different story, right? Because the volumes are going to be down. Anybody exposed to British Columbia lumber, which, a third of our lumber comes from there. They're talking about closing down certain shifts at sawmills. Volume's going to be down there. Other sectors, I think volume's going to be up in other areas. So I think it's going to be one of those. This is sort of a continuation of the pandemic, right? Where we saw some commodities absolutely tank and others go through the roof. And it kind of, that's what Jason's implication was, that's what we're going to see in the freight market. Your experience of the freight market will be dependent on what sector you're in, which again is, Jeff, Ryan, Dan, that's probably no surprise to anybody, right? I think there's a few carriers out there that are generalists and haul a bit of everything in that dry van. But and part of what my keynote speech today is talking about, you've got to understand the demand for what you haul. You've got to understand who's buying it, what they're buying, what the long-term trends are, and find a niche and service the heck out of it. So I think that the guys in the spot market on the fringe, so the carriers that have very little bargaining power, that are in the spot market, haven't got any fuel recapture program, who paid a lot for trucks, are probably going to find the next 3 or 4 months really, really difficult. And I say that with all sincerity because this is, you walk around the conference here in Dallas and everybody's talking about, got to understand your operating costs, got to understand your operating costs. Well, for 40 years, I've been in trucking. That's not what people do. They don't understand their numbers, intuitively. It's not a subconscious reaction to know that I need, my break even's 207 a mile and I need to price it at 250. Like it's not in trucker nature to be like that. So lots of things happening in the freight market. I think the other stories that would be sort of rumbling around are the rail unions are not, that I think one of them rejected one of the agreements yesterday. There was a port stoppage in Oakland this week. So you think about certain markets where there will be opportunity. Some of those markets where there's port disruption, as we've said all year, there'll be pretty good activity for dray carriers as some of those urgent loads need to get moved.
Hmm.
Well, if we look back, like even at the beginning of the pandemic, I can remember vividly, and I don't remember the name of the carrier, but they hauled automotive, and all they did was automotive. And literally within, gosh, I don't know, maybe you guys will remember better, but I think within
Pam.
like
It was
6
Pam.
weeks, was it
Yep.
Pam? Within 6 weeks of things happened and they shut down.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like everything they had was focused on that automotive, and when all the automotive kind of went with the steel and all the tariffs and all this stuff that happened,
Right.
like literally within 6 weeks they were out of business. Or now maybe they
Right.
just decided to close, but they were out of business. And yeah,
Yep.
the commodities you haul
Yeah. Yep.
are very important to the vitality. And this is
Yep.
where a lot of carriers and brokers, it's like, oh, I got in with this automotive company, just as an example, and I'm doing like 30 loads a week, and you make little margins on like 30 loads
Right.
a week,
Right.
and everything seems busy until something happens, and then it's like,
Right.
oh wow, hold on here.
Right.
I mean, the town I live in Erin, there's a truck that goes up Main Street for the Toyota plant in Alliston. I think they measured it every 3.5 minutes.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's mainly Warren Gibson is the main holder of that account. But when things shut down, I couldn't imagine, because that's a huge part of their business. Now,
Right.
they've been around a long time, so they were able to weather the storm. But when you think about it, I had friends that were moving paper towel. That was their business, and raw paper to make paper towel. They were booming. I mean, they had their best months ever, while other companies are literally going out of business. It was insane, the division of the products. But then the flip side of that, what was it, like 6 weeks later, there was such a stockpile, or maybe 8 weeks later, there was such a stockpile
Right.
because the shelves were gone. So they were like, give me that. Let's produce more. And then it was a flip, right? All of a sudden their business dried up completely. So it's
So Dan, one more data point I had on the demand piece. Cash shipment index came out yesterday. Tim DeNoyer, who's the one of the senior VPs at ACT Research that does all the new truck and trailer orders, he writes the Cass Freight Index report. Very clever guy, ex-Wall Street. Really knows his macroeconomic stuff. So in the Cass Freight Index report yesterday, shipments were down 1.4% month over month in October, but on a year-over-year basis, up 3%. He's talking about, soft demand. They're all temporary to a varying degree. The point he made towards the end of his report was seasonality. And I don't know if you had a chance to catch our show this week, but one of the things that was really, really obvious to me in all of our data points when it comes to the spot market, remember it's 10% of the volume moving, was how seasonality was like this magnetic force is dragging the market back to seasonality, to normal times. And unfortunately, normal times are on a demand side, like 2017, 2018 type spot market levels, not stellar. But capacity is still sort of sitting in excess. So we measure capacity by the number of carriers posting their trucks on the load boards, looking for loads. Highest it's been in 6 years for the start of November, highest ever. So worse in flatbed, not good in reefer. So just incredible seasonalities emerging. I don't think we'll see spot rates at sort of the watermark for low-level spot rates in the recent times of 2019, but there's still a little bit of room for spot rates to go down. So I don't know that we're out of the woods there yet. I'd love to get Jeff's perspective on how RFP season's shaping out, because a lot of those contract rates for 90% of the loads hauled are going to come into routing guides in, I guess, January, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I just had a conversation with one of my clients, and he's holding off until next year, the first quarter on that, because they're moving facilities, they're changing facilities, they're actually getting bigger facilities because they're outgrowing, which is a great problem. And then what they're thinking about is, even though that they're a consolidator and they're consolidating all freight for the big box dealers, they're actually going to start leasing that previous warehouse to customers who need warehouse space, and then build another one that's much larger so they can do more consolidation for even more big box dealers. So that's a great thing, the way that I see it. So they're trying to make revenue on two different sides of the fence there, on the operational side for warehousing and then on the delivery side. So that was good to hear, but they're laying off a little bit because they are booming.
So Dan, the other thing that really stood out to me this week when I looked at our data, and I was just struck when I looked at it Sunday, just in terms of how the seasonality is behaving. One of the things that jumped out to me was flatbed rates were something like we're about a penny per mile off 2017, but when you look at the volume of load posts on the spot market as a proxy for demand in the spot market. The shape of the line, you can download this report at our market update blog page. But if you look at this, well, you won't be able to see this, but I could share it with anybody that wants to look at the load post volume chart, is tracking directionally exactly with 2021 and 2020, which were crazy years. But the shape of the line is the same direction, but half the volume. That's the difference, right? So you can just see this enormous seasonality drag on the market. We normally see volumes taper off a little bit before Thanksgiving, and then they pick up again. Different in refrigerated, though. Refrigerated volumes normally are picking up, and this was the data point I wanted to share with everybody, just to give you a sense of how much demand has softened. And I'd love your guys' opinion on this, but I think it's more so because we've got more capacity than demand softening, because I think demand is flat relatively year over year, although produce volumes are down, but that's not everything reefer carriers haul. The data point that stuck out, I went back and looked at our historical line haul spot rates. So remember, these are line haul spot rates excluding fuel. In the 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, every single year, with the exception of this year, spot rates increase about 12 cents per mile on average. It's about the same in the 3 to 4 weeks leading up to July 4. They normally go up about 12 cents a mile. It takes a lot of volume to drag up a national rate 12 cents a mile over 3 weeks. But that's the seasonal force that's sort of exerted around certain events like Black Friday, Thanksgiving, July 4, things like that. So the average is 12 cents a mile over the prior 6 years. This year, when you look at the 2 week cycle of spot rates reefer, they've gone down 2 cents. So instead of
down 2 cents.
Down 2. Now we've still got, this is the busiest week for shipping Christmas trees right now. So capacity is going to tighten in some of those Pacific Northwest, Quebec markets. We've got a lot of produce still to be moved ahead of Thanksgiving. So there is room for spot rates to still increase, but I can't see. And this is almost a repeat of what we said before July 4. If you remember the show, we said, I don't think there's any way we'll get back to the sort of level of increase leading up to July 4. In this case, leading up to Thanksgiving, that we would normally expect to see. And that I think that to me is really underpinning how the market has shifted. And it's really in the spot market, it's a reflection of how many trucks entered the market last year and took advantage of low spot rates. We've got another, probably, again, love your guys' opinion, I think another 3 to 4 months before we bottom out in this spot market cycle. That's what it feels like. So we'll see probably flat spot rates between now and the end of the year, which again is not exciting because you're only talking about line haul rates of $1.70. You're probably running at about $2.40 a mile with the fuel surcharge. Again, not a shabby rate if you can get $2.40 a mile, including the fuel surcharge in the spot market. But if you're not getting the fuel recapture program and you're just running for line haul rates, it'll be tough sledding literally over winter because there's just not enough margin in it with the way operating costs are.
I agree. I think I actually think there's going to be another shedding, you will, of the market of carriers going out of business, people that bought trucks way too expensive just to try and capitalize on the market, not really paying attention to their bottom lines. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a 2019 bloodbath again, but I have a feeling it's going to be the way it is. I hoped going into this, like when the pandemic started, when everything started, I really hoped going into it that we learned from 2018-19. Especially since trucks were coming off the line at a third of the way they would normally. Used trucks were just I mean, my neighbor drives truck, and we have the conversation all the time. And he spent, gosh, he was driving for Speedy, and he spent probably close to 7 months looking for a truck because he was like, Dan, it's not worth it. And we see it on every level. Like I'm looking for a snowmobile. Not a chance would I pay what the prices are that they're wanting to pay. And it's you got to have that ability to be able to step back and say, okay, I'm not going to do it right now. But people would pay it because they're looking at $350 a mile on the spot market. And they're looking at it, they're like, oh my God, we could do it. And yeah, they probably made some money, but until if you stay ahead of that curve, then you have that foresight, right? But I mean, I was even talking to people where people were offering them for their used trailers almost as much as what they can buy new trailers for. And like, it was insane, Jeff. It was insane. And I mean, I remember having a conversation with somebody, and he was like, I'm trying to tell my CFO, let's do it. And he's like, well, how are we going to replace it? And he's like, yeah, you're right. So they ended up not doing it. But I honestly think there's going to be a cleansing. You know, we talked about this last week.
We did,
guys, on Friday. We talked about it when, like, even in these markets, you have a cleansing of salespeople, not just companies.
Oh yeah,
like the whole industry gets cleansed, and the people that are like that I'm gonna say care, and I don't know if that's the right word, but the people that care about their career, the people that decide to elevate and level up their education and level up their skills. And I think that's the same way on the carrier side, like leveling up their education on what it costs to run a truck, leveling up their skills on how to maintain the trucks in a proper order. I think this is the evolution of, or as they say, the growth period for some people, right? Because Dean, you and I both, I mean, all four of us know there's going to be some companies that make a mint in the next 6 months.
So I think one of the points you make there is about, experience, knowledge. I think that we talked about this on the show, that people have this time around, a lot of people first of all said, hey, what's a fuel surcharge? How do I get me some of that? Especially the guys in the spot market. So I saw this massive transformation in people's knowledge base around the fuel recapture program. And then guys and girls were starting to add it into their rate discussion, so they were figuring out, because when you're dropping, as we've said on the show repeatedly, well over $1,000 every second, third day, it really hits you in the face in terms of what it really costs to run a vehicle at $5.31 a gallon. What are we up about $1.70 a gallon in the last year in diesel prices? My point is, I think this is what my gut says, and I'm not always right. I'm wrong a lot, but my instinct tells me that if carriers are still operating now, and I'm talking about smaller operators, if they've got this far after diesel prices went up that much and they're still doing, reasonably well, I'm optimistic they'll be able to ride this out. Now, the bigger fleets, though, that are running closer to the wind, that have driver turnover problems, utilization level, they can't get enough miles into their trucks to keep drivers, they've got turnover problems. That may be a different story, especially if they've got pretty high debt levels and they're chasing freight. They're not specializing in anything, and they're, not like Daman's business, where he's got a niche and a great customer base and a fantastic business model. There's a lot of other carriers out there that have grown. Because one of the themes of the conference here is, growth for the growth's sake can be really dangerous. And I think there's this notion that, it's linear. More trucks I add, the better I'll be, which everybody kind of laughs and smirks at that, because if you're in trucking, you'll know that, more trucks means more headaches, more problems, and maybe most likely more inefficiency. And that's one of the challenges they've got. So I think this could be one of the biggest growth areas we saw in the last 2 years was between 1 and 40 trucks, which again is kind of the bulk of the industry anyway. It's hard to break down and say which segment, but predominantly mostly owner operator. So my instinct is that if they're doing okay now, and I kind of take a litmus test with drivers on social media, and I talk to them and give them a call and find out what they're doing, how they're going. None of them are saying we're desperate and we've got to sell. Now, of course, you'll see the odd video on TikTok where people would, are complaining, but those people would boo their own grandmother anyway. Like, so there's nothing ever good going on.
They have complaining videos on TikTok?
Yeah, apparently. It's a really good insight into the trucking industry. It's I'm absolutely fascinated by it. I mean, yes, you see a lot of what goes on out there. It's not a lot of fun for a lot of drivers, but of course it's biased. You don't see all the guys and girls out there saying how wonderful it is and how great it is, and look how fast this shipper unloaded me. Maybe 1% of the time. Most of the time, it's a war story. So.
Yeah. All you know what I'm dumbfounded about, Dean, going back to your comment that they don't understand their operational cost. I can't believe that. I mean, everybody, even personal life, business, they should know what their costs are. I mean, especially in this business, it's just dumbfounding.
In any business, Jeff.
Yeah,
any anything.
I mean, come on. I mean, that's like 101 shit. I mean, that's unbelievable.
But it comes back to, I use the analogy of insurance companies. Insurance companies love underwriting truck fleets because it's huge licks of cash, right? And they use that cash to invest on the money markets to make money. That's how they make a lot of their profits. Underwriting profits are elusive at best for a lot of the commercial auto underwriters. They're usually paying out $1.05 for every buck in premium on commercial auto because the losses are pretty bad when they get into the multiple reinsurance layers. But it's the same sort of logic. Truck drivers, when they have this cash flow operating mentality. You know, how many loads do I need to do this week? How many miles? Oh, I need to make 20 grand this month. I got a 10 grand fuel bill. I got, 3 grand in truck payments. So it's kind of this mentality of I'm going to generate cash on the front end to pay for everything else at the end of the month. What I've got left over means I'm making money. And of course, that doesn't always work out, especially when a lot of people in the last 2 years came into the industry with very little business experience, let alone trucking. And that's one of the big things that we see at conferences like this today and at Freight Fest was the educational piece, the emphasis on being good at the business of being in business. And that would apply to everybody in logistics, in broking, every single business. I just find it's less about, driving and steering, loading a truck. If you're in logistics, you've got to be a student of this industry and never stop learning. I've not stopped in 46 years of being in this business. It's a fascinating industry. But the one thing that's evident is it's always changing and there's always something new you've got to think about.
I always say that. Always, man. Yeah. Yesterday is gone. You have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. Just live in the moment today. Do the best that you possibly can. And brace yourself for tomorrow because something's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. So Daman makes a great comment there, Dan, about he thinks Q2 next year is when we'll see some of that impact. I think he's absolutely spot on. On our contract freight side, on our shipper side, we're not seeing. We think contract rates will start to dip at the start of Q2. That's what our long-term forecasting has got. Yeah. So we think that
and
freight
he's right,
cycle
expenses catch up.
Yeah. Because you'll be chasing cash flow. If demand is soft in the first quarter of this year, a lot of guys will be trying to keep their trucks running. And it's hard to get trucks back on the road too because you have your holiday breaks, you've got Thanksgiving and then Christmas holidays. A lot of utilization level, drops. When I track miles on interstate highways, it's something like 7 to 10% of capacity drops out over Thanksgiving and then the week between Christmas and New Year. And then it takes time for drivers to come back on. One of the anecdotal stories we've heard from large fleets is drivers have been making so much money, they're really looking forward to spending more time at home, which again affects your seated availability of trucks. So I think there's a lot of sort of nuance to what's going on, but I think Daman is absolutely correct. The bottom of this cycle, when we'll start to see the most pressure is towards the end of Q1, Q2. The wild card, of course, is diesel prices, and we're not sure. I mean, they're forecasting them to come down, but heck, they've gone up 30 cents in the last 4 or 5 weeks when I look at our chart here. So, it's not much fun.
Yeah, another thing that impacts it is the owner operators out there when you have bad weather. The risk factor that the money that they're making, they're paying a mortgage not just for their house but for their truck, and some of them, a lot of them, don't go out in really bad weather, so that affects capacity as
it
well.
Does.
Won't take that point. Yeah, because I mean, you see those accidents out there that these guys. I don't understand how these guys drive 50, 60 mile an hour in, complete whiteouts, and then they smash into everybody.
Without a CV, no CV.
Well, did you guys see on the yesterday? in one of the group chats I'm in with a bunch of sledders, they started posting pictures of the polar vortex coming down for the East Coast this time. And like apparently over the next, if it hits the way it hits, there's like feet of snow. So like up Sudbury and North Bay for us, they're talking 4 or 5 feet of snow. If this polar vortex does what the Weather Network and everybody's saying it's probably going to do.
Wow.
And then it comes all the way down to the East Coast, like down into South Carolina and North Carolina and stuff. And it's when you're looking at it, and you're looking at kind of the way the Weather Network has it mapped. And I don't know, I mean, it's like anything, right? So we were supposed to get 5 centimeters last night. I don't know if we got that, right? It's kind of the weathermen are the only, or meteorologists are the only ones that can wake up every morning and go on a dartboard and still keep their job if they're right or wrong, right? But you look at that. So now you have that's going to play into right around that Thanksgiving, beginning of December timeframe.
Yep.
Right. So you have another polar vortex, like what happened in Texas 2 years ago. Was it, Dean? 2 years ago, I think?
Oh, yeah.
Was it 2 years ago?
February last year.
All the accidents on the bridges and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. That was bad.
Last year was Texas? I thought it was the year before.
No, it was 2021, right?
Yeah, I think it was last year. What I saw on YouTube and stuff that. The bridges were freezing up, and it was bad. It was really
that was when we saw capacity just that really affected the market, and it never really recovered. So good.
So now we're into that time frame in the calendar where this is going to have a huge impact, or things like this are going to have huge impacts, right? Like it all adds up.
My weekly blog post this week is about preparing for winter, and it's on like multiple levels: preparing your truck, preparing your trailer, preparing yourself, and preparing your surroundings. Right. So there's 4 categories. I got a bunch of guys to provide input into what do they think are their best tips. But right now you're seeing guys out there, guys and girls, are totally unprepared for winter, and I think the most vulnerable guys, the girls, are the ones that run north-south, right? So south to north. More importantly, you're running from warmer temperatures into colder temperatures. Things can turn pretty quickly when you run south to north. The guys that are running in the northern latitudes all the time, of course, they get used to it. But Jeff is dead right. One of the things I always talk about is the miles get a lot harder in winter. And there are a lot of owner-operators in particular who, own their own trucks and paid off everything, who are very selective about when and where they run. And for good reason, because they've seen the dark side. It never ceases to amaze me. I was just, shooting some video last night for social media of the Interstate 35 here in Dallas. So I'm in downtown Dallas, and I'm not sure what the hurry was, but these guys were blowing the doors off these trucks. They were flying, and so everybody's in a hurry. So this is like Texas. So it was 6 lanes, not an issue really, but you put a whiteout into that, and you've got people driving along. Music videos running, ELD device, navigation, maybe a TV somewhere in the background, and a headset on, and no CB, and they are totally disconnected from the world. And that's what really bothers me more than anything, is that
driving blind.
Sorry to harp on about this, but a CB is a safety device in the vehicle. It's a life-saving device, but I see that a lot of people out there, even car drivers, are like this, right? Everybody's disconnected from their outside world, which of course is part of the design of modern vehicles. Is it's kind of counterintuitive, but you can really disconnect from the driving task really easily. But when you get into a truck, I've always said that you drive a car, but you steer a car, but you've got to drive a truck. Like there's a difference between steering and driving. But these modern day trucks, I sat in the new Western Star yesterday, and man, digital dash, we got ergonomics out the wazoo. This thing is like a Rolls Royce, quiet, I think, nah, give me a Caterpillar with twin sticks and straight 8 pipes. Like, I want to drive this thing. I don't want to sit here and go to sleep. I think that's part of the problem, Jeff, is you see these winter events, and it behooves me to see how people can run headlong into construction zones without knowing that it's there. That's just a complete disconnect from the driving task. And that is, unfortunately, what we see in winter. It does impact capacity. You're absolutely right. And of course, it must happen on the asset or the non-asset side in terms of trying to find carriers that are willing to take loads. Because on the flatbed side, right, you've got frozen straps, you've got frozen chains, you've got just the whole wet weather thing. And Damon's got a great point. We have weather alert services that pop up on our ELDs for the drivers. That's a really good point. I've worked with some fleets when I was at Omnitrax. We would geofence certain trucks with lower tenured drivers. So we would geofence their truck and then integrate the weather feed so that as soon as the weather got bad in a particular area, we would be sending pop-up alerts to the drivers. That's very clever technology, Damon. It's a really good way to give drivers visibility because, as you know, whiteouts and squalls can happen in an instant.
Oh yeah,
you can go
come in
from clear
fast.
sunny days. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
See, I use Waze all the time. Like even if if I know where I'm going, I just put it on because that I find, you're talking about staying connected. Yeah. That to me helps me stay connected because it'll show you when something's on the side of the road or if there's debris and it's all user based, right? Yeah. An idea like that for trucks. I mean, well,
right.
It's kind of flip side, right? Because if you're the only one in the car and you see a car on the side of the road and it's not mapped, you're like, click, click, click. Now you're not looking at the road because you're trying to, so it's kind of two ways. But from a four-wheeler perspective,
right.
I find Waze keeps me connected to the best possible routes where there's a slowdown. So you can literally, as you're coming up, and if you have a blind turn, for example, and you see red here, well, it's slowed here. So you kind of slow down as you come around the corner instead of coming around at a $130, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I should probably hit the brakes.
Hey, Dean,
I just realized. Sorry.
Dean, did you see the all the warehousing and stuff down in Dallas that we were talking about?
I did. Went for a drive. Absolutely breathtaking.
Unbelievable. Even on 35, when I was driving down there, you're absolutely right. These trucks are hauling butt, and they are unbelievable. It's because of all the warehousing and stuff. I mean, they got places to go. They want to get there quick. But it's just amazing how it exploded down in that area. It's just crazy.
Every second truck, Jeff, was a 40-foot international box. A few 20s and 40s, but a lot of imports. You could see all that volume coming out of Houston, coming up that interstate. Just before we dive off weather, I suddenly realized why I've never seen one of Damon's trucks on highway through hell, through the Coca-Cola, getting stuck and having to get dragged out by the wreckers. I now know why. He's got all the technology.
There you go.
Not getting stuck there. They don't want to have our acquiring drag them up the hill. They're serious truckers up there, though. I have a lot of respect for British Columbia truckers. They don't come any tougher when it comes to that part of the world. Even when you get up like near Grand Prairie and it gets into the -40 region, when you're up there in the oil fields and the tech coal area up there, that's brutal. A lot of admiration for Canadians for lots of reasons. But
Damon actually put a very good point. Damon just put a very good point that the scariest times is at the beginning of winter and at the end of winter, because we always have those freak storms that come in, or the freak this or the freak that they always say when you go to take your snow tires off in Canada anyways, just wait another 3 weeks because something's going to happen. And you see it every year. Like today we had snow. And did we have snow Monday, Ryan? Was that the first snowfall? Was it Monday?
Not in my area. I'm in the city, so we didn't have. Yeah, our big snow was yesterday.
So now we have snow in the city. If you go to to see the accidents, it skyrockets because everybody's like, oh well, I'll wait a week or so to put on my winter tires. I'll wait a week to put on my winter tires, and all of a sudden, boom, and they're like, oh, I got to go to work, and their cars are all over. I have my winter tires from my car on Kijiji right now, and in the last day and a half, I've gotten like 40 people that want my tires, but it was like crickets, and it's literally like they say 3 degrees or colder, put on your winter tires. And it's the same thing, especially out west.
Yeah, Buffalo, the lake effect, right? I mean, comes in there, they get 3, 4, 5 feet of snow just like that, unpredictable. Right. But when it comes, it comes.
Oh, yeah.
Really.
Right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I've never done the winter tire thing. Never. I don't know. Maybe is it a Canadian thing? Because I just run the same tires all year round.
It's law in Ontario.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Oh, heck, it is. Is it law in Ontario? Right.
Yeah, it's a lot in
No.
Ontario. So because
Well, it
but you
is a
can't
lot
put
in Ontario,
chains.
yeah.
Yeah, you can't put chains on, but you got to
Yeah.
have your winters on.
Yeah.
Because like you just see
Yeah, and
everybody
it's
fishtailing. Like, you know, it's probably one of the worst
On
things.
cars.
You get ticketed
Uh,
if you get pulled over and you don't have winter tires on. They'll ticket you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I've seen too many
But you
accidents.
think
Like,
about it, right? Like you have
right.
you have your all season tires, okay?
Yeah.
And it's about the rubber compound. So
Mhm.
when it gets cold, the rubber compound on those turn hard.
Yep.
Well, if you've ever taken ice on ice, it's like, I mean, you see it, and it's crazy where cars just slide. Like they'll be driving and then they just go right into the ditch, and just or they go and the worst part for me in winter I always hated was the lines in the road from other people's tires when you go to switch lanes.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, you're kind of doing one of those. Those spin people. I mean, it's insane how little it takes. My neighbor here, his kid was going up a street we call Winston Churchill, and it's a pretty bad road. A lot of farm fields. So you come out, you have houses on each side with trees, and obviously you come out into this like major snowdrift because it's a farm field that's open for miles on each end. And he goes, Dan, I was just driving, and all of a sudden the wind threw him 10 feet into the ditch. Because you're on the snow, you're not on the road, you're on the snow, and now your car becomes a sail, and you just right off the road. I mean, it's crazy how fast it happens. And then you got, the Burlington Bridge, and you got trucks going across that bridge empty, and the wind coming howling in there is insane. And you got to think, an empty truck, sure, it's got weight to it, but the size of that sail for the wind to hit is crazy.
Yeah.
And
The
it takes
suspension's designed to have a load.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Unbelievable. Well, I love driving in snow without
Me too.
I hibernate.
I like going into church parking lots and doing donuts.
Hopefully you drop off some donuts for them too.
I did that with my daughter. I said, let's go into a parking lot and I'll throw on the emergency brake and go, what are you going to do? How are you going to steer out of this? Opposite left is right is left, and she got out of a few problems that she had. I love driving in the snow. Rear wheel drive, nothing like it. Hate front wheel.
Oh, I love rear wheel drive in the snow. It's so much fun. If you can control it, it's so much fun. But when you get out of control, it's kind of like, all right, whatever. It is what it is.
Right,
We'll
you
see
asked
where
for
I
it.
end up.
You asked for it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think next week Ryan can't talk so much.
I'll skip
What is
that,
that, dude? We can't get a word in.
It's like, I mean, I can't get a word in edgewise with this guy. It's crazy.
So inconsiderate. Yeah.
I'm just not trying to be hung on it, but I love listening to, especially with Dean with all the data and Freight Fest. I paid attention to it a lot, and just seeing amazing influencers that I've seen on social media, the things that they're doing, the posts that they're making, and the things on TikTok and Instagram and things like that. So I'm a fan. I'm just a fan here to learn, absorb everything, and kind of go from there.
It's a good point. One of the ladies that I met that was particularly impressive at Freight Fest was Melanie Patterson. She runs a business called Team Integrity in Chicago, specializing in helping carriers get government contracts.
Oh, good.
So it's like it's a part of the industry I never thought about, but it's a market that's obviously there. Every state's got a website where they have contract. You can apply for contracts. Melanie would be a good person to have on the show, Dan, at some point about expanding that opportunity, because it applies, I think, to anybody in logistics brokering and asset-based trucking also. Lots of very clever people out there that have found a niche.
What's Melanie's last name?
And Patterson, Melanie Patterson, Team Integrity in Chicago. Yeah, lots of very clever people out there. One of the other guys we talked to was Adam Wingfield. He spoke at the same conference. Very clever guy, does some really good consulting, ex-owner operator, really, really strong on helping carriers, run their business successfully and profitably. I think that there's a lot of good events popping up. One of the things that's it's come out of the pandemic is the plethora of, podcasts, webinars like this, where you can get more access to information without having to go anywhere.
Yep.
Hopefully every week we share a few nuggets, and every day people pick up something from this show. I know people listen to our IQ show and pick up little bits here and there. It was funny. Yesterday, I was at a booth and talking to this lady, and she's runs a brokerage, and we're chatting and chatting and chatting. And I thought, oh, I'll have to throw in a plug for our show. And I said, so, well, you should watch our DATIQ show. She said, yeah, I watched it this morning. And we're talking and talking and talking. And then she sort of stops and says, oh, that was you. She had no idea that. No, and I'd just come literally from running the show here in the hotel to racing back to the exhibition floor, and I'm chatting to her. So you can. So that was. So my thought was that's the curse of assumption, right? You can never assume that people know that just because we're on this show that they actually know who you are and what you're doing. And I think that's the message I always picked up from sales is repetition. Clear, concise communication, short messages, do it often. And don't assume, because that's, I think, what's the saying? It'll make an ass out of you and me.
Yep.
Not assume me.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look at a lot of the, like the Gary V's of the world and all this kind of stuff, they only say about 5 or 10 things, but they say it over and over and over in multiple different ways because it's going to resonate with us. Maybe one way it's said, but not necessarily another way it's said. And our mindset, our frame that we're in, where we are in our frame in our life, where we are in today's day. Maybe I'm a little foggy this morning, and then tomorrow I'm not, and I hear the same message like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that makes sense, right?" So, yeah.
The Patrick Lencioni, I think I've got the name right, wrote a book called about corporate health, and again, that name escapes me. It's terrible. I'm having a shocker today. One of the things he talks about is corporate health. He said companies don't succeed because they're not smart. They don't succeed because they're not healthy. And one of the things he talks about with organizational health is building trust. And he said the way you build trust is through, 3 messages, like 3 things. What are we doing? And you repeat those over and over and over throughout the entire year. But it takes a lot of thought to get to the 3 things that you're going to do every day that are going to make a difference. But he said the key is focus on those things repetitively. Never assume that people know what you're thinking, because we all get distracted. And because what he's saying is you've got to resist the temptation to be pulled off onto the next shiny object, which is a real flaw in management in every company.
Well, it's tough, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you been pulled off of to something shiny?
Yeah.
Like, I'm bad.
Every time I see another shiny Peterbilt, I'm off. Like,
I mean, that's why companies post their mission statements. When you walk in the door, you get to read that same line over and over again, to embed it into their employees' minds. This is what we do, why we do it, and how we do it.
Yeah.
So very important for sure.
Awesome. Dean, I wanted to ask you about basically that Hurricane Nicole. Did we see anything actually happen with that freight in the freight market there? Because I know we kind of said because of Ian, it's been a little bit slowed down, but
absolutely nothing. There was some impact on Miami load post volumes are up, but rates went down. So, like if you said capacity was going to tighten, it didn't. From a freight market perspective, it was relatively minor. Load posts are up, rates down to about $1.09. So remember, spot rates out of there for dry vans are pretty low. Reefer lane, some of the reefer lanes out of Lakeland, people hurried to get a bit of produce out of the way, not knowing how far north it would go. Rates are up at a penny per mile out of Lakeland, but only to $1.15 a mile for northbound loads. So so right now you're in deep backhaul country when you get to Miami, where that hurricane came in, and then parts of Florida. So it really, I don't say this lightly, but it was a non-event from a freight perspective. Obviously, tragic event in terms of the loss of houses and human life, as it always is. First, I think that was a pretty rare event to see a November storm, a November hurricane.
Oh, late in the season too.
Very late in the season. But they've said that they are rushing to get their plantings in of things like strawberries in particular. So they're a few weeks late because of the waterlogged and the damage. So I think they're still confident they'll see the strawberry season come online as it would normally do. And for everybody listening, that's the sort of unofficial start of the produce season next year, is that sort of strawberry plant city festival that happens late February, early March. That's when the produce season really gets going. It doesn't really officially start, I think, until you get into southern Georgia in April. around I think it's Vidalia onion season is kind of the pack date for the Vidalia onion is kind of the official starting line of the next year's produce season. So there's lots of trigger points to watch along the way, but Hurricane Ian has certainly delayed things down there a few weeks, as the cold weather has done in Yuma, Arizona for leafy greens. They've had a lot of delays there in getting that crop in. So
we've seen that. I can tell you, we've seen that in our grocery stores already. 3 weeks now, I've been trying to find romaine lettuce.
$8.
Finally, last week I found it at Real Canadian Superstore.
Yep.
3 romaine lettuce heads, $10.
Yeah.
And then not only that, they have iceberg lettuce, where literally it's the size of a softball, $8.
$8.
Like, are you guys crazy? Like, that's insane. Like where you used to be able to get a 5-pack of Andy Boy for like $6, and now a 3-pack, and they're not even like they're half the size of what they used to be, and I mean just crazy.
So they've had soil disease problems. The soil disease problem in Salinas it's been killing the lettuce right at harvest time. So they've had a real issue there with both weather and soil disease. And then of course we've got cold weather and no water to speak of in Yuma, Arizona. So we're going to see, I think, pretty tight demand or pretty tight supply of those leafy greens over winter in particular.
And I see
so those salads at a restaurant are going to go from like $10 to $20.
Well, I think they switch over, right? Like they switch over to like, even for us, when we went to the grocery, we saw romaine lettuce for $5.50, and they're normally like $2, but you still see the cheaper prices for like the arugula and like the spinach and like the mixed greens. So I think people are just going to switch over to that, because I'd love to talk about like the financial impact. Like, you know, you look at Subway, let's say they stop selling romaine lettuce or they upcharge, right? Like now it's like $10 to get a sub, even like a cold cut sub, right? So you look at those little trickle effects and you just see everything kind of, okay.
Exactly.
Like, and it goes back to like the first video.
It happens in every industry. It's all about supply and demand, right? If the supply is plentiful and it demands that there, you're going to have cheap rates, right? But if it's
not, and none of that, like if you look at Subway, for example, like Ryan, I don't know how long you guys have been going to Subway. I've been doing Subway for decades. The meat is a third of what they used to give you.
Oh, it always
like right? Like when
here's
I used to get a Subway
here's
club,
a tip, guys. Here's a Ryan tip for you. This works with burritos too. If you're ever gonna get double the meat, wait for them to put the first set of meat, and then you ask them for double the meat. Don't say you want double the meat when you start, because they'll do that regular portion. But Dan, you're so right, because I think even with Subway, they even have to classify their bread as not bread. Like it's actually like cake with the sugar in there and things like that. But we're getting off topic, but we're gonna see the quality decrease. I don't know about you guys, but my wife and I, it's better to cook at home, like, you know, and you know, you cook whatever you want, and you know, it's the same price. So it's just,
well, you know, what's really good about this is now we're going to get a new sponsor, Subway. So thanks for mentioning.
Well, they need a new one after Jared and his whole stuff. So.
As soon as that came up, I said, "Who's going to go to the Jared side of Subway?"
The third rail of podcasts.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, all right, into some deep territory there, boys.
Dean, I want to ask you about like the West Coast imports. I think I was watching the show yesterday, and you guys were talking about that. Hey, there's been a decrease because of the contract negotiations kind of dragging on.
Still going on. There was a port stoppage in Oakland. I don't know that it lasted all that long, so that's still going on. I think the bigger issue, though, is the rail. Like they've got till December 16, I think it is, Jeff.
Yep.
So that's the bigger issue. That's what worries most people, I think, is the railroads. There's still a lot of angst going on there.
Whether they get the extension or not.
Yeah, but the West Coast port's still having problems. The other thing that's fascinating is we've gone from July 1, when the ILWU contract expired for the waterfront workers on the West Coast, and at that time we were still seeing, we were still talking about record volume of imports. Imports have obviously tanked and are dropping away dramatically. So I wonder whether you lose some of your negotiating power, because one of the messages from the ILWU was shipping lines have made billions of dollars in profits. We want some of that. And this was literally a quote from folks over there. Now you think about what's happening in the ocean liner industry, where they've dropped about 30% of their capacity. They've parked about 30% of those vessels on all those sailings on that Trans-Pacific trade lane. Spot rates have literally crashed on the ocean side. So, and volumes are way down. I think I saw in the JOC today, volumes in the combined Los Angeles, Long Beach were down 26% year over year. So there's a definite drop off in volume there on the West Coast because of the congestion of last year. But more importantly, people are worried about a repeat of 16 and those labour stoppages / strikes that could happen.
Did you see who the number one port is now?
It's Elizabeth, right? New Jersey?
Yeah, New York, New Jersey. That's a
your home state.
The Jersey guy knows. Hey,
the Jersey guy asked the question.
Well, of course, I knew the answer, but I had to ask to see if you guys knew that.
Yeah, it's been it was number one for I think last 3 or 4 months. It took over Los Angeles, Long Beach. Savannah's always in at number 4. Yeah, a lot of volume.
Who would have thought?
So prediction time. We had a lot of containers loaded outside shipper warehouses last year because warehouses were full. So we didn't have many chassis trailers. I wonder, so then we've got this massive problem of empties and not enough space to store the empties once they're unloaded. So what are the odds that this time next year we're talking about a massive pile of empty containers that we just don't have a home for? There's no freight to put in them because we've ordered so many new containers and chassis trailers. Like, so that just to me feels like a normal reaction, a bit like over ordering retail freight for a demand that kind of disappeared and we've got bloated inventories. I worry about it on the truck side. We've got new regulations coming in on the heavy vehicle side that are going to really impact. They've got that 2024 CARB mandate that's coming in California. There's going to be a significant pull forward of orders next year to get trucks that aren't obviously a different compliant level. So they'll be ordering more trucks next year. So look, these are really interesting times. I can just see when fleets start to get new trucks out of factories middle of next year, they'll flood the used truck market and you'll have a massive amount of trucks sitting around, trying to find a home. So I think we're still going to see a lot of market disruption before we can say that we are, through this pandemic.
And when
that container thing happens, I think it'll be your best time to build a container home.
Right.
Well, they are.
There you go.
They are buying up land around the ports to do just that. But the thing is that when these new vehicles come into place, because of the new regulations that are enforced, these owner operators aren't going to buy those used trucks because they're not going to be in compliant to go to the ports. Right. So
2010 and older. Yeah.
So what's going to happen with them? Secondly, with the imports that aren't coming into the West Coast, you can see warehouse space starting to free up. Not the case on the East Coast, because that's going to run into a lot of problems. But I do see warehouse in the very near future.
I apologize, guys. I got to get going. This is my hospital. I got to get going. I apologize.
Okay.
See you guys tomorrow.
Great show.
Thanks, brother.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So it's going to be interesting, Dean, what we're going to see coming, and same with Houston as well.
Yeah, I think that for those of us that are in planning, I'm not in planning, but if you're in planning, asset allocation, route planning, finding out where shippers need to route freight, this West Coast shift is going to change how you think long term about long haul freight. Like, because the west to east intermodal model will change because more volumes coming into the ports along the eastern Gulf Coast. That affects how you run your trains, where you position your 53-foot intermodal boxes. That affects your trucking operations considerably. A lot of people won't be sending their trucks to the West Coast because there's no volume coming back out. That's going to affect a lot lot of carriers. I don't have the answer, but I just know that's going to be.
Look at the rate swing too. Look at the rate swing too, Dean. Right? I mean, it was always more expensive west to east, and it was always less expensive east to west. How long is that going to last before those rates start going up with the influx of imports that are coming into NY, and J? I mean, you'll see that swing. Don't you agree with that?
I agree completely. Yeah, they're starting to. The big difference between the two is starting to. That gap is closing. That's the point. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So get prepared. That's going to happen probably early next year. Because they can't, it's not sustainable right now. It may be for a little bit, but I see them changing. It's
It's
in the
interesting.
works. It's in the book.
I love watching the G20 summit. Is it the G20 where President Xi
G20 right now. That's going on
President
right now.
Biden are meeting? You know, you kind of think about that global stage and these relations, and you know, the two superpowers, right, in terms of economic contribution to the global economy. China and the US are sort of the two big players in that. You've got lots of domestic unrest and people wanting to nearshore and get a lot more goods made here in the US. It's just to think that you can buy something, you know, for $2 that's made from parts from 6 countries and have it, you know, delivered overnight by Amazon. It's like, how does that happen? Like, I still can't figure all that stuff out, and how people make money at that. Maybe they're not, but maybe it's a volume play and you're making a penny per item or something.
That I was just about to say that. Yeah. You know,
Right.
they have to sell 100 of them to make maybe $20.
Yeah, you're gonna do that, and it's crazy that you say that because last Wednesday I went to something expo called Pro Fusion, and it's for photo and videographers. So Canon was there, all the big Nikons and all that stuff, and just hearing them talk about the big parts, like these lenses have gone up like exponentially. But they were literally saying, like, I had a conversation with them, we're like, where do you get all your parts? And they're like, some of them say they don't know, like, you know, they'll ship it from like China to Australia to go get something done, then back to the US, and then back to there just to get printed. And it's like, you know, all these moving parts, right? And it's just something as simple as that. So
we bought a new Land Rover Discovery 12 months ago, and because of the semiconductor chip shortage, they only give us one key fob. So in a family with 4 people, one key fob's not good for a family of 4 people, and especially when my wife happens to leave it in her handbag and take it to work and leave me without wheels. And so I called them and I said, you know, about that second key fob, you said you'd give it to us when the supply chain eased. No, we're still selling brand new cars with one fob. God, a year later.
Yeah, we're on a waiting list right now.
Yeah, but you know something? That's all about making money, because they know that what's the high probability you're going to lose one, and now you're going to spend $350 to replace the damn thing. You know,
I'm waiting for the call. Yeah, I'm waiting for the call to say, I'll come in and we'll program it for you, and while we're there, we'll just have a look under the hood and see what else we can stick.
Well, you know, it's really interesting when you talk about the automobile industry, right? Everything that we buy that's sold new is built to break. They know exactly when those parts are going to last, and that's where they make all that money on the replacement OEM part. Aftermarket, they know precisely, and that's how they're able to put that cost factor on when they sell that car, because they know they're going to make X amount of money on that car in 10 years after the sale, and it's usually a lot more than what you paid for it.
Funny about that.
Yes, that's crazy. Like, that's why I like the 90 Civics. But gents, great episode.
Great show.
I had an amazing time with you guys. I learned quite a bit. Dean, thank you again for always being here every Wednesday. Definitely something that we definitely love. Everybody, thank you for coming out this morning. We'll hit the replays again at 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern time.
And good luck, Dean, on your keynote this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes. Is that going to be live anywhere, Dean, or is that only conference only? Okay, so it's strictly...
it'll be recorded. You'll be able to catch it later.
Yeah. I'll check it out. Good luck, my
definitely love to check it out. And you know what? I would love next week to really dive into like winter preparedness. I know you said you had the post.
Yes, that's a good
week. I think we should really dive into that, because like people like myself, we don't know about these things, right? So it's just
I will
really good
send you my article on it, so you've got some time to read, because it's a long one.
Beautiful.
We can pick the highlights out of it. Okay.
Awesome. All right. Take care, guys. See you guys tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Centurion Trucking. Our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion Trucking and start designing